start recording. Specifically the, where is it? Iridescence is going to give me a little bit of this kind of like metallic-y look to it. There's going to be some translucency and some transparency going on here, since I want to show these kind of orb egg looking things underneath. There's going to be some illuminated objects in here with these light bulbs. I have a bunch of light bulbs in the background. Honestly, I'm just going to set up like one of these and duplicate it a whole bunch. And then the atmosphere is being created, as I said, with a Pixar Volume that I had sitting in here before. So yeah, should be fairly straightforward to go with to do this. So let's go for it. First thing I want to do is I would like to go ahead and kind of set up my shot or my angle that I'm going to be working with. This is something that I always tend to do whenever I'm creating a composition, because I'm trying to think of this as like basically from the point of view of a photographer or cinematographer. You want to basically light and texture everything from this one particular point of view, okay? Unless we're going to be revolving around the scene or whatever, but we need to make sure we're lighting and texturing it to this particular angle in the same way that, you know, if you're taking Melissa's class for character animation, she'll probably tell you need to animate to the camera constantly. Same idea here. You need to light and texture it to the camera, okay? So this right here, I kind of already got a composition already set up, but here, we'll just talk about setting up that original shot. So I created a new camera, going under perspective, new. And I'm going to go ahead and call this main camera. And so this will be the camera I'm actually going to be shooting with. And then I can kind of go in and move it wherever I want. A lot of times I'll also do a split cam. So if I do a dual view right here, panel layout, I have my perspective right here. I can go ahead and bring up my main camera right here. Turn off that grid. And I want to be able to see through the camera and have it show me exactly what's going to render. Now, if I render, you know, this shot right here, it's basically a square aspect ratio. It's a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. But if I'm rendering it 1920 by 1080, that's not square. That's like 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 aspect ratio, and it is definitely not gonna. It does not match this. So I need to make sure that what I'm actually rendering is visible in this camera view. Best way to do that is to go right here. You'll see something called resolution gate. If you click on that, that'll bring up a kind of a fogged out window with a clear space in the middle. Okay, that clear space is always going to be what renders, no matter what. So typically speaking, I'll always have this up so I kind of know what I'm looking at. And then it's kind of a digital way of sitting here and doing this. Essentially, it's the same thing as doing this. So you're getting your shot. Now I'm doing a split view because sometimes I like just to grab the camera and move it around, and it's a little bit easier for me to do it in this view with a split, and I can grab the camera and move it rather than trying to move it around here. Additionally, if I'm animating the camera, I can do the split view, set my keys, and move it from frame to frame, versus trying to set my keys from here and try to animate from there, from that point, within the camera view. It does not typically work very well. So split it out, act like, you know, you're actually a cameraman standing next to your camera, and physically move the thing around. Maybe a little bit of a lower view. Maybe something like that would be kind of nice. All right. I'd like to go ahead and lock the camera so I can't accidentally move it around. in that view. Because you're going to accidentally. So one easy way to do that is to go ahead and set a camera keyframe. So main camera, I'm going to go ahead and select translate XYZ, rotate XYZ, right click, key selected. You'll see a little key pop down here on the timeline. That means anytime I move this camera, I can just change my time and it'll pop back to its original position. Additionally, if you want to make sure it does not move at all, you can right click and click lock selected. That way you have no ability to move that camera. Make sense? All right, let's go ahead and set a light in here. So I like having, if I have something that is a light in a scene, like say, for example, there's a lamp, I'm not usually going to put actually a lamp in a scene unless it's actually going to be illuminated. Like there's a purpose for everything you're putting into your scene. So here I have this light bulb hanging on a string. I might as well use that for my primary light source. Like I'm making that compositional choice. If I'm not going to have it, I probably don't even need to have it in the scene. But yeah, so if I want to go ahead and, make this thing illuminated, the first thing I want to do is go ahead and go over to my lights, and I have an option for a mesh light. So I can go ahead and turn that on. You'll see I get an option for a mesh light right here, and that's actually attached to this lamp. And if I go to renderer, you'll see I'll have an option for Renderman that I can click it. And if I do, it's a real-time render. It doesn't look great, but it's an option for you to kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like when you render it out, when you do your full render. So you can see it's illuminated right now. So going over to basic, you'll see it's an intensity of 1. We can bring it up to an intensity of 10. So flip it over, look at it through our actual camera view. Come on. There we go. So you can kind of get an idea of like how it's actually bouncing off of the objects in the scene. It's pretty dim. Like let's bring it up. That's a little bit better. I wanted to give a little bit of a tint to it. So I'm going to tint a little bit yellow and then kind of go halfway in between. And then I have an option for temperature. You guys ever look at light bulbs and you see it actually says like temperature on there? You guys know what that's referring to? Huh? Yeah. I mean, the light's not like 6,500 degrees. Like it's not physically that hot. But what is it referring to? And because I think it is actually Kelvin, it's referring to that. So I think it's like referring to like like if you have like a metal that's like 6,500 degrees, this is the color it would actually look. It'd be glowing that hot. So the higher the temperature goes, the bluer it turns. So if I have it at 8,500, you'll see it actually gets cooler. And then if I lower it to, let's say, 5,500, you'll see it actually warms it up. So so you have one direction or another, depending on what you're wanting to look for. When I'm setting up lighting, if it's kind of a welcoming, homey feel, typically I'm going to go with warmer tones with the lighting versus a cooler white or bluish tone. You awake back there? You all right? Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and go a little bit cooler, 5500, maybe 5000. We can change the color just a little bit here, and then the texture color. That's actually going to change the color of the basically what the color that's coming off of here. All right, let's actually not go that much. That's too much. All right. So we might need a little bit of help from here. We can also create a little sphere light. And so the sphere light is going to be useful. Kind of give it a little bit of help. I'm going to stick it right below. So you'll see it's kind of it changes depending on the position we have it in. Okay. Put that there. And we'll go ahead and start putting in some materials on, say, the pills. So for this first pill, let's go and do fix our surface. And then we'll make this one bright red. Make the other one bright blue. And then we can do, we'll do the chairs the same. A little bit lighter gray. Although they're kind of looking a little bit brown because of the temperature of the light. That's altering it a bit. And then down here, we're going to have our pill floor. Kind of going something maybe a little bit in between, like a purplish color. Oh, that's gonna be maybe a little bit too bright. Okay. I'd like to see a little bit of that floor, but I think we're getting not a whole lot of that angle in here. So I'm gonna actually unlock the camera real quick. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. Relock it. If you wanted to have this camera movable, but also kind of locked at the same time, what I might suggest is grouping the camera to itself, or creating a controller that you can put on the camera. So let's say maybe a little curved circle. And by placing that camera underneath it, you'll have something you can actually move, but also the camera is locked at the same time. So it give you a little bit of best of both worlds. Let's see, I think I need to unlock this. Let's modify these transformations. Why does it translate X as does not have an incoming connection? Maybe it's the key. Delete connection. Okay, let's try it again. So now I can grab the camera, move it around, but then also have this locked. So you can kind of still reposition it if you need to, but you're not able to move it in this view. So it's kind of useful. All right. Let's go with the pill material. So these pills, they're like made out of gelatin, right? Kind of like translucent. You guys ever look at pill capsules? You know, you ever just stand there in the bathroom just staring at these things? No, probably for the best. Not frequently, but I mean, you have seen them. Yeah, they're translucent. They're a little transparent. So I kind of want some light to actually transmit through them a bit. So we can set that up by using a couple of options in here. One of them is going to be a subsurface. So under that material, Pixar 15, we have subsurface. And if we go over right here to gain, this is actually turning it on or off. And then we have kind of a gradient of how much we actually turn this on. So right now it's set to 0, which means it's 100% off. But if we turn it to 1, that means it's 100% on. And so that means it's going to allow light to essentially transmit through the object and bounce around. And then that will illuminate the back side of that object. Okay, so comparing this to the blue pill has essentially pure blacks on the shadow side, whereas the red pill now has a gradient of darker reds, crimson, maroon color right back here. So it kind of pops it out a little bit more. You guys get that? Does it make sense? Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. We do have an option for a color for the subsurface. Now you'll notice that like this kind of turned white when I turned it on. That's because the color here was initially set to white. If I change this to yellow or gold, it'll make it look a little bit more red since yellow is closer to red, but it's also making it look a little bit goldish. So you see some of that yellow speckling in right there? You guys can see that, right? Okay. Like I know there's like a difference between the projector and what I can see. So if I'm saying something you guys don't see it, like let me know. Okay. And then if I do like a green, you can see the green kind of pop in as well. So you get some flexibility here in the coloring. Now, subsurface is going to be really useful if you're, say, setting up like skin or rubber, those types of materials to get that light to really transmit through. So let's go and go back to red, kind of like the goldish, so maybe like a little bit of an orange. And then you have the mean free path distance and the mean free path color. This is actually going to be the color that transmit onto the other side. So this side right here. So as the light comes through, that's going to be the color that pops out from the opposite side. If you shine a flashlight onto your hand and you look at the other side, what color do you see over here? Red, orange, yeah, something like that. So that would be essentially the color of blood that we're seeing through there. So if I pick, say, something like a green, you'll see some green influence kind of popping in right through here. Let me get a little bit closer to that for y'all. Come on. There we go. And then that distance here, we can set it up to basically tell it how transmissive we want this object to be. So setting it to 1 is going to make it really solid. Setting it higher values means that light's going to transmit further through it. And that will depend on the scale of your scene. So remember how I was saying light does behave a little bit differently at different distance scales previously. This is one example of that. So for example, a elephant versus a tree frog. Tree frogs are very, very translucent. Like you can shine a light right through them. Elephants, not so much because they're big and thick and heavy. So this path distance is going to allow you to kind of inform how much light needs to transmit through that object. And that's also going to be a denotation of how big or how large that object might end up looking in the scene. Okay, let's do 20. So I want some green to kind of come through. And then let's actually take the gain down a little bit. I'm going to go to primary specularity here. I do want this to have a little bit of a shine to it. So primary specular, I'm going to go to face color and I can bring this up. That face color is going to directly be influenced or influencing this highlight right here. So you'll see that color change as we change that face color. You have an option for roughness. The lower that roughness, the sharper that's going to be. The higher the roughness, the more matte it's going to look. Okay. All right, that iridescence, bring that up. It's going to give us some interesting color change as the light hits it and rolls away. Let's go and do a preview render. I'm going to go under Renderman preview render, and I want to see what it looks like actually rendering versus the viewport rendering. Okay, that's looking kind of cool. All right, escape to go ahead and stop that so we can keep going. All right. So let's put a little bit of glass in here. So that would be complete glass. You'll see it's actually going to be very transparent. I just want a little bit of it. Okay. All right, that's looking kind of cool. All right, so let's look at the other pill. This guy right here, maybe make him look a little bit different. So we're gonna go blue. Maybe make him look a little bit sharper, a little more plasticky. This one's kind of a little bit metalish. You can do layered specularities on here. That's what the primary specular, rough, and clear coat is for. So if you wanted to actually make something look like it's been shellacked, i.e. have layers of gloss put on top of it, this would be an opportunity to do that. Now this kind of works in the idea of using texture maps in order to create that effect. But the general idea is you could take in, say, a primary specular, and it would have a different roughness than, say, a clear coat. They might have less of a roughness on it. So you'll see the general effect is, yeah, you get something that's kind of matte, but also pretty shiny at the same time. And then we'll do a little bit of glass on here. And then the refraction color. That's going to be changing the color as the light hits through it. You'll see it refracting through it, and it'll turn red on the backside right through here. And then roughen that up. Okay. So this guy right here, so we got kind of a purple. Give it a little bit of a specular. I mainly want it to be pretty translucent. So let's go down to glass. I'm going to turn that all the way up because I want to be able to see the little spheres inside, these little egg things. So I'm going to actually bring down the, if you want to make like basically perfectly clear glass, bring the color down to black. And that's going to make this pretty dang clear. Okay. Anything that goes into white is going to just make it look a little bit cloudy. So make it darker. It's going to make it more clear. And that's going to be on the primary diffuse right here. And that's after you've turned on the glass settings, refraction and reflection, which will be right here. Refraction gain, reflection gain. Come on. There you go. Okay, so we can do play around with. So we got, I mean, we basically have these values turned all the way up. We can go and mess with the roughness on here. We'll lose a bit of that clarity in here. So lowering that will actually give us a little bit more clarity in the glass. And then I'm going to go in and do a little bit of purple for that refraction color. And a little bit too much. There we go. And then we have the orbs inside of it. Let's turn this off. And so one thing that might be kind of interesting is having a little bit of like lighting coming in from underneath them so they kind of pop a little bit. We could probably do that by putting in a light underneath. So I would probably go for, let's see, that's not the right one, 24, there we go, 24 by 4. Let's get rid of that one. All right, let's do a disc light. Make sure it's pointed up. And then each one of these, I think we're on Pixar. Yeah, we'll just grab all of these. Are they in here? Sphere. That's all of these. No, not quite. Yes. Okay, cool. I got them all. All right, let's give them a new material. And we'll just make them white for a second, and then we'll do subsurface, and then we'll give them a primary color here. Maybe something kind of a little bit pinkish. See what this looks like. Yeah, there we go. And then this light down here, it's kind of reflecting off the way I actually see it. I don't really necessarily want to see it. I want to take the light and lower it down out of camera view. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Bring it all the way down. And bring that intensity up. And let's check and see what it looks like in here. That's looking kind of interesting. Maybe a little bit too bright. I think that I'm a little bit loose on the camera distance here, since I'm kind of seeing the, the edges of that little glob of spheres. So I'm actually going to take that camera and pull it in a little bit more. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay. Any questions so far? I know I'm going a little bit fast, so if I'm going too fast, let me know what you're missing. Okay. All right, cool. All right. So kind of looking at this image, I mean, we have an exceptionally dark background. There's really nothing back there. It's just really super dark. So generally speaking, I would like to add some rim lighting and some side lighting to pop the chairs out from the background. And I'm going to do that by using a couple of, it could honestly be either be like distance lights or rectangle lights, whichever one honestly you feel like looks better. But I'm going to try out the distance light, or not distance light, rectangle light first. Let's see how I like that. The difference between those two is going to be the distance light. You're going to be avoiding that near distance hotspot that you get with the rectangle light, which you can fix, but distance light might be a little bit easier to initially set up. But both of them will fit the bill. So you'll see that first rectangle light here. It's kind of bouncing a little bit of lighting up here on this chair and popping it out from that dark background. So it's just making it look a little bit more visually interesting. It's not something I want to get to be too strong or too overburdening inside the image. I just want it just to kind of just complement the rest of the image. So I'm gonna do the same thing here. You'll see this one will pop it out too. This one might be a little bit too strong on this side. Let's do like 0.5. It's a little bit better. Then I'm gonna do temperature on here. Let's do 4200, and that'll give a warmer glow on that side, and then can offset the other side with a cooler glow. See how that looks. Okay. All right, let's do a test render. Oh, that's definitely not what I'm looking for. Do you know why that happened? Anyone know? Why did I get this camera angle and not the other one I was hoping for?
Yeah.
Which one? Ooh,
You didn't have the right one selected.
exactly. Just a really simple mistake. So yeah, just to make sure I have
I guess
this camera selected. Huh?
I guess in this case, it's the black ones.
Yeah, I need the left one selected, but I was working in the right one and I forgot to click. So I just make sure you just kind of click over here and it'll activate that window. To be honest, for doing these render previews, I have actually not seen something for that. When I do batch renders, yes, you can tell it which camera to render out of exclusively, but I actually have not seen that in the render settings for just doing test renders. That's not to say something's not in there. I may just not have dug in there enough. Okay. For some reason, this is making me think of the what is it, Between the Two Ferns talk show that what's his name has. Yeah. And they like a little table, just like a little fern on it. And yeah. I love watching those episodes.
This class right now, like, I don't know what it is that makes me think of that show.
I don't know. I just no, it's just I mean, it's just an interview. He just does like stupid interviews with people. Yeah. Remember the one he did with Barack Obama, and I thought he was going to get arrested. All right, that's looking pretty cool. I kind of like it. I like the underlighting with the little pink egg looking things on the bottom. So that's looking interesting. One thing that is kind of distracting me a little bit is that this highlight right here is super crisp. I'm not digging that. So I want to resolve that. So let's look at a way we can do it. If I click on this light, I should have some options under refine. There we go, specular amount right here. Should be able to take the specular amount down. So again, that's under this light, attributes, refine, specular amount. And that should knock down that amount of light that's coming in. Yeah, that's much better. See, before it's just like this really bright blotch, and then now it's much lighter right there. Could even take it down to 0 and it probably would remove it entirely. And then we can also play with the cone angle if you wanted to. Right down here under intensity near distance is cone angle. And this is kind of acting like a spotlight with the barn doors on them, where it kind of like focuses in the light a little bit. It's essentially it's acting like that. So anything outside of that actually will not receive any light. But then you have an option in here called cone softness. And that's going to create a penumbra drop off where the inside of this square right here is going to receive full light, but everything from here to here is going to be on a drop off curve. It's going to go from 100% to 0, and it's going to give you a really beautiful gradient. This is what's going to make lighting look a lot more natural, because anytime you have a spotlight on something, it's never going to be super crisp, right? That outer edge will never look super duper crisp. There's always going to be some amount of fuzziness to it, and that's what this is going to create for you. So I really like using that. I'm going to shrink that down a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. Also bring in that penumbra, or that cone softness is what it's called here. And then we'll do another render. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So one thing doing that diffuse and doing that cone angle is doing for me that I'm liking is it is making this highlight much less intense than what it was before. I don't necessarily like to have lighting that like screams out and is distracting to the viewer. So I'm trying to make this a little bit, so it accentuates the objects, it pops them out from the background, but it's not too distracting. So this is nice. Feels a little more natural right here. Like it's more bouncing off of the the ground, or it's actually transmitting through the ground from that light underneath. Okay. And then got a couple of materials. Let's do the legs. I do like kind of like a brown wooden color. Let's see how much we can even see on it. I'm gonna bring that roughness up here for the specularity. So, because if this is going to be wood, wood's not, unless it's like really well polished oiled wood, it's not typically very shiny. It's not typically that reflective. But I do want them to pick up. I do want the wood to pick up a little bit more lighting, which is why I'm bringing up that face color. But I'm also bringing up the roughness to kind of offset that. So it's not appearing to be too gigantically shiny here. All right, and then the chairs. I don't know why. I kind of think like gaudy gold would be kind of interesting. I'll give it a little bit of an iridescence so we can get a little bit of a color break up here on the surface as that light rolls around the surface of it. And the edge color is set to black for the primary specularity. Let's go with something that's a little bit red. And then right in here, you'll see advanced, you'll have anastrophe. So the anastrophe is going to be determining the actual direction of a specular highlight. So like brushed metal, for example, has a fairly distinct anastrophe direction to it, meaning the specular highlight on it's typically elongated, and it typically has a certain angle to the light. So we can kind of play around with this and try to get some of that look in here. To get that to kind of actually work, you do need to make sure you have a roughness. So like set to 0 or set to 1, you're not going to be able to mess with the anastrophe on here. So it needs to be somewhere in the middle. Let's turn that off. We're going to go turn it on it here. Just a heads up, doing this is asking a lot out of your graphics card. Just FYI. So I know someone's gonna be like, I can't have it do this into the DisplayPort view. It's so slow. Yes, I know. All right. So let's see if we can get this to kind of pull a little bit for us. Yeah, it's giving us a little bit of change here on the specular highlight. That's looking a little bit better. And then we can do a little bit of a clear coat on here and also kind of push in a little bit of yellow. So I'll see it's going to kind of build that layered, reflective kind of metallic-y look to it. And then something else, I haven't done it with trying to do gold before, but I think this might be kind of interesting and see how this turns out. We have a node that we can plug in called dirt. I want to see how that works for us. So I'm going to open up that hypershade again. Let's probably at some point it'd be a good idea for us to start naming these shaders. So I'm going to grab Pixar 17. I'm going to rename it gold. That should give us, yeah, gold's right here. I'll have to rename all of these at some point. All right, so right click, graph network, graph your network right there. You have all of your nodes and everything you can pick out from essentially this list right here. It's going to be comprised of Maya only nodes and also Renderman nodes. And if you have Arnold loaded in here, Arnold nodes as well. But right now, since we're working with Renderman, we need to be looking in Renderman. And I'll do a little search called PXR dirt right here. And drag it in. You can also hit tab on the keyboard at any point, and if you know the name of a node you're looking for, you can type it in, dirt, hit enter, and it'll bring it up there for you. Is anyone Blender alumni? This is my favorite thing out of Blender. This is so cool. I really wish they'd bring this to Maya at large. Huh? Oh no, the search. The fact that I can literally hit spacebar and type in anything I want and it'll bring it in. I wish Maya did that outside of the hypergraph. Yeah. All right. So this is this particular node right here. It's called dirt because it kind of can make things look a little bit dirty. But the idea is it allows you to change color based on the object's topology or the object's surface change. So if there's a lot of crevices in an object's mesh, it'll actually allow you to have color congregate there in the way that dirt congregates in crevices of like your hands or feet or wherever. So that's kind of the idea. You basically would start off by taking it and saying, hey, let's do result RGB, which is going to be the out color. And you would put that into, let's say, the diffuse color. So it would just hook up right there, okay? And so what we have essentially is occluded and unoccluded areas. It's going to be turning white and black. Let's try this maybe with a simpler material so it's a little more evident of what I'm trying to do. Okay. There we go. Okay. So I'm bringing back up the dirt. So I have two options, occluded, unoccluded. And if I go and do, let's choose like a green. And then we'll do unoccluded, it's gonna be like a red. You'll see, you'll get a better idea of what it's trying to do. So it's changing the color based on proximity to a fold or a direction change in the mesh's surface. So right here, you can see kind of the top of the cushions and these kind of more exposed areas on the back of the chair. It's getting redder. Those are unincluded areas. Included areas, it's turning more green. Okay, you guys with me on this? Make sense? Okay. So what I'm thinking is we can use this essentially to create maybe like lighter shades of gold and darker shades of gold based on the inclusion of that mesh. So if I do, let's say, occluded areas and unoccluded areas, let's say, let's make, maybe this is gonna be a little bit more orange. And then the unoccluded is gonna be a little more yellow. It's gonna be a subtle change, but I think it'll look really nice. Okay, let's give it a second to do its thing. Any questions while I'm waiting for it to do it?
Is there a way to make a essentially a Pixar surface that uses like a UV map already? It's like I have a model of the moon, for instance, and it already has a wrap around for like all the complex there.
It already has a texture map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it still works with it. Maybe?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of trying to simplify the process for you guys at this stage since we are
okay.
just starting. So we're not talking about doing like texture maps or UVing, because in order to use a texture map, the model kind of has to be UV'd. So if you try to take a texture map and put it onto a non-UV'd model, it's going to look awful. Like that texture is going to be like, looks like confetti and just glued to the surface. So it will not work. But have no fear. Next week, you get to learn about UVing. So we're going to be jumping into that pretty quickly. Okay. So I think it should be visible to you guys. What's going on here? So like I said, the green and the pink was showing unincluded and included areas. So switching up those colors, we now have yellow and a little bit more reddish orange colors in here. And we should see some of that here. So like this is a little more yellow, this gets a little more orange, this is definitely more orange. This area is much more yellow. And that's not necessarily based on the light that's hitting the object. It's based on, again, the inclusion of the mesh itself. Does that make sense?
Can you describe what inclusion and unincluded areas are
Yeah.
right there?
So let's say, I guess really the easy thing to do is everyone hold up your hand. Okay. Let's turn off the light. Okay. Hold up your hand. Spread out your fingers. Okay. And light's hitting everything pretty evenly, right? It's not much shadow in my hand. Now if you relax your hand, light's still hitting it, but now I have shadow. Okay, what's happening is light is coming in and it's trying to get into some of these crevices, but photons can't actually do it. So we'll say that's a finger. Okay, so light's coming in this way, it's hitting this, and light of course bounces off when it hits the surface of your skin. So it bounces off that way, bounces off that way, bounces off here, bounces off here. So this gets illuminated, this is illuminated, this is illuminated. It's harder for light to get in to this area because it specifically can't bounce into that area as easily, so you get fewer photons that basically eliminate the area less. So this would be considered unincluded. This would be considered included. Because light just can't get into that area as much. It essentially is anywhere that has a fold or a dip where light cannot get into it.
And just using
But-
the lights in Renderman wouldn't be able to get you the same effects.
So it's really kind of focusing more on like shadows, whereas we're kind of forcing a shadowing.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, it does, but this is just us kind of forcing the situation. Yeah, so like I want specifically to have that reddening, oranging of the gold in those occluded areas where it shadows, and I want it to be more yellow than some of these other areas. It's just, it's an artistic choice. Does that make sense? Okay. So if we take that, we've already edited the Pixar dirt. So we can take that gold. And we'll drag that back onto here. It's gonna be a lot, or it's gonna be not as noticeable here, but we're still gonna get that color information. So putting it back onto the gold material we created, we still have all that highlighting and all that specularity that's going on here, but now the color information is changing just a little bit. So yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and do the volume that I had in here before. There we go. So I'm going to go over here to the volume. Looks like a little cloud. This guy right here. You have an option for creating a Pixar volume. You would have to have a mesh already kind of set up for that. So if you have like, if you wanted to turn the pills into a volume, you could do that. If you wanted to just make a volume box, you can do that too. Or you can do a sphere or a cone. For this particularly, it's going to be the box. And I'm going to go over in attribute editor to volume 2SG. You'll see the surface material that is actually attached to it. So we'll pop over from that shader group into the surface material, and that'll take us to the actual volume itself. So when you want to edit the volume, make sure you're actually selecting from the shader group the actual volume. You can also go into Hypershade, and you have your volume sitting right here. So it's kind of like a shader, but it's also not like a shader, but it does sit in the with the rest of the shaders. All right, if we just go ahead and render this by itself. It's going to be super thick and no light's going to be able to transmit through it. So we'll need to go ahead and drop down density, which is going to be right here. It says density float. So I'm going to take it down to 0.25. Let's preview that render. I can see something, but it's pretty dark. Down to like a 0.1. Well, notice as we drop this density float, it does render faster. Volumes do tend to make render times go up. So this because it's basically having to calculate how light is going to transmit through that volume itself. So it just takes time. So that's looking kind of interesting. I dig it. It's a little bit thick. I'm going to take it down a little bit more. 0.05. That's looking pretty good. Actually, the gold is actually looking better than I anticipated it would. It's not bad. Okay. So I know at the, what is this? This is 1920 by 1080. So in general, when I'm kind of running through these projects, is that a student or is that art students? In general, when I'm kind of doing my test renders of this, I'm going to be running at a much lower resolution just to kind of pop out these images just a little bit quicker. So if you go under your render settings, we have options under here to change the resolution that we're rendering at. Now, what you're going to be turning into me is 1920 by 1080. So that's HD 1080 right here. That's what you need to select for your final render. All right. Now, your default render size is probably like 640 by 480 or 920, something like that. So we go, where is the 9? Oh, you know what? Let's do HD 540. That's going to be pretty small. So the HD 540 is going to be a quarter of the render size resolution that the 1080 is going to be. So if we do a preview render there, it should move quite a bit faster. It'll be something we can kind of get a quicker look at. You'll see it actually moves really fast here. It's gonna not look, the quality's not gonna be great, but it's a good way to kind of check your image quickly. But 100% do not turn this into me. Not even joking, please do not. But it does move a lot faster. Now, one thing you will want to do, you're going to have to do, is you will need to look at your sampling. So let's just say, for example, if this was finished rendering, it's really noisy. There's a lot of irregularity in the pixels, a lot of dark and blotchy areas, light areas, dark areas, things like that. We need to take care of that. So the first thing you'll work with is you'll go under your render settings. You'll go to Renderman, and you'll see under sampling, you'll see where it says min sampling, max sampling. So probably for you guys, it is set to 0 and probably 128. I think this is running off the settings I had from a previous project. So that's why it's set up a little bit higher. So you're going to be starting off with this, that you are going to get noise with this. The fact that you have lights and shadows in your scene means you are going to have noise. The image is not going to look super great. You need to work to clean this up. And so the first thing you'll start working with is upping your max samples. Now, typically I would kind of bounce on areas that are, I believe, like powers of 2. So 2, 4, 16, 32, 64, et cetera, et cetera. And so like 128 is a power of that. And it seems to give me a lot better results, but you can technically use any value you want. So if you want to go up to like 200, you could do that. But I might do like 256. And then preview render it and check and see what this thing's looking like and let it render through. Now, in terms of, what should I be rendering at? That is entirely dependent on your scene. I don't know what your final max sample count is going to be. I've seen some images look super good at 512 samples. I've seen some look bad at 2048, so over 2,000 samples. It's going to really depend on whatever your scene is. If it's still noisy, we need to look at maybe upping those samples or looking at another way of cleaning it up a little bit. So for example, this scene does have some shadowed areas and some highlight areas. Typically speaking, darker scenes are going to have a little bit more of a noise issue than lighter scenes. Scenes that are out in daylight, that are bright, they don't usually have as much of an issue. So they can get away with lower sample rates than darker scenes. So if any of you guys want to do like Batman, you're going to need to have some render time, because the more samples you use, the longer that render time is going to be. Because essentially what it's breaking down as, every time you up those samples, that means that the render engine, Renderman, is going to be actually looking at every single one of your pixels that's you're rendering out, and it's going to be resampling it multiple times, trying to figure out which color that pixel needs to be or what it needs to be displaying. Okay, we'll let this render for a second. So let's say you've gone through this and you've maxed out your samples and it doesn't seem to be cleaning up really at all. You have two options. One is playing with your min samples, which are right above here, and these are set to 0 by default. That is going to be forcing the render engine to go back and resample your darkest area. So areas that are coming out as values of like, what is it, like 0, 0, 0 is like black, I think. And it's going to resample those areas until it gets something that's not 0, 0, 0. So it's going to look at that and just try to keep resampling. But it's going to resample to whatever value you put in here. This will bump up your render time, but it will give you at least some sort of value and clean up that noise in those darkest areas. So start off low, start off values of like maybe like 4, 16, 32, something like that. And just kind of see how that looks. I would not go crazy with those min samples. That is a real quick way to like just getting stuck on the computer and it's never going to finish rendering. The other option is pixel variance. This is a value you can set that's going to essentially, it's going to essentially allow you or allow the renderer to add more variance between whites and blacks. So the lower that value, the more variance is going to allow in there. So the more contrast is going to have in there. So right now it's default set to 0.015. Lowering that value is going to add more variation. It's also going to increase your render time. I will usually play with the min samples first and then start lowering the pixel variance after that. But generally, I don't usually mess with pixel variance. I don't usually get to that point where I need to mess with it, but you can. All right, let's see if this is still going. Still going, okay. All right, so what you'll do is you'll wait for this to finish. It'll say it over here. It'll give you a timestamp essentially. That'll let you know when it's finished. And then when you're done, you can hit Control S and save out the image. So remember, save it as a TIFF. And there you go, you save out the image, and that's how you save it out. You're good to go. All right. Any questions? Okay. Is that a lot? Okay. All right, then I think I'm done for the rest of the class. I want you guys to go and get working. So you have about an hour and a half to work on stuff, hour and 20 minutes. So work away. I'll walk around, check on you guys, see how you're doing. Okay. Do you have a question?
So you use the volume to like thicken the render out?
Yeah, it gives an atmosphere to it. So you see how we have that kind of glow coming off of that light. So if we go and look at before it was added in.
So it gave it more like interior feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it basically gives it something for the light to bounce off of inside in the air.
Okay.
So like fog, smoke, whatever you want to call it. To me, it gives it an atmosphere. It makes it feel more, I shouldn't say realistic, because like if we're sitting in a room and it's that foggy, like that's not realistic, but I don't know. It's an artistic choice, and I think it ends up looking better because of it.
Would you use volumes just for scenes or?
No, volumes I would primarily use for exterior scenes, because if you're outside, you know, depending on the distance, you're going to get some sort of atmospheric interference, you know, between like, say here and the prison, there might be some sort of haze or something. Everything kind of grays out a little bit because of that atmospheric interference.
Thank you.
Yes.
Would you prefer if the light source was in that image, or can it be like outside?
It can be outside. My statement was really more of, a lot of times students will have like literally a lamp sitting in their scene, but they don't even make it like illuminated. Like that's a perfect opportunity for you to make something look really interesting and be a focal point. But it's not. Sometimes students just don't even do it. So it's like, why have it in there in the first place? Yes.
Could you take a look at the scene? I wanna finalize it before I like really start getting into the lighting and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I'll walk over.